discuss their ideas, just sort of friendly.
About a subject that we spend lots of time on in our daily lives, which is meetings, and in particular what Office is going to be doing about it. So we'll have two speakers today, two presenters. Both Liz and Jane are working on the meetings project, but there actually are several different groups in Office, which I think you might want to talk about who the other people are working on meetings. But first we'll get an overview from Liz on some of the research that was done, and then a presentation on what Office is doing about it. So without further ado, I'll turn the time over to Liz.
At least you know I'm using Messenger, right? Yeah. All right. Can you hear me all right? Yes?
Yes.
Great. I'm Liz Friedman. I am a product planner with Office, and I'm actually based down in Silicon Valley with the PowerPoint team. That is Brendan Bush's team down there. It's actually PowerPoint and several other groups, and they now own the meetings workspace. They're referred to as the meetings team internally with Office, and they own a meeting workspace product, which Jane will show to you a little bit later. But in my role as product planner, I've been working for about the past year and a half on understanding meetings. How do you define meetings? Who goes to meetings? How often? How big? All of that. And also working to identify what are the opportunities, where are the pain points, where are customers saying, well, they're always saying I hate meetings, but what are the specific reasons why when you dig a little bit deeper? So today I will walk you through some of our initial findings about meetings and customers' feelings about meetings and dynamics, and then talk about how we narrow the focus of the whole meeting space for the Office team, and got to some target customers, and then I'll just touch on where we see the opportunities in the near and longer term, and then Jane will take it over and show you some actual pictures of stuff that's being built. So this abstract was from the invitation that was sent out, so I'm sure you've seen it. But obviously knowledge workers are spending a lot of time in meetings, and we want to help people prepare, conduct, and follow up on those meetings. So that's part of our goal. So told you what we'll do in the presentation, and now I'll move on. So I have to say, actually, when I was gearing up for this meeting, I thought, oh, this is going to be the first time where we're going to have like full front row. So you actually disappointed me. I figured, I'm going to be at research. Everyone's going to be in the front row, like, jotting things down. So expectations. So, all right, top-level learning. The meetings area is ripe for innovation. It's such an exciting area. It's been a pleasure to work in. 92% of Office customers who we've surveyed say that they attend meetings. So that's already a nice size pool of people to be talking about. And 37% of employee time is spent in meetings. There are these studies all over the place where people try and gauge what percentage of people's time are they doing this, that, and the other. And this is one figure that we collected, but I think it indicates, gosh, there's a lot of time in meetings. And the higher up that you go up in the organization, the more time is spent in meetings, which shouldn't really be a surprise. As of, I guess, 2 years ago, there were 11 million business meetings in the U.S. each day. Oh, my God, there's so many places where we can go in and make a difference. It's so exciting. Cost of a meeting, lost productivity from tardiness. Like, I was a little late getting started today, so sorry about wasting your productivity. Wasted time, inefficient discussions, wrong audience, you name it, there are problems. You talk to people, I hate meetings. We had the OAC come in, which is the Office Advisory Council, and we had people representing 12, 13 different companies. And before we did our little spiel on what Office is thinking of doing with meetings, we just did a quick brainstorm. We said, sir, tell me, what do you hate about meetings? I hate X, Y, and Z. What do you hate? And it was like, they all just couldn't pour out fast enough everything they hated. It was really funny. So you add things like travel costs. You add people's time away from home. Yeah?
So before we move on, I just want to ask you, what's your definition of meetings? Is this presentation part of meeting? So, on very informal things like meeting? Or
you bet. Thanks for calling that out. For our surveys, I initially said meetings were any time that 2 or more people interacted. And I wanted to have it, I did say work-related meetings. So it could be, my going up and saying, Dean, we need to sit and talk about something. And, that could be a meeting. It could be something like this where you're all here. And granted, it's kind of a one-to-many situation. But there's more than one person here exchanging information in some way. So So yes, there are different classifications of meetings. You could say it's a one-to-one, a one-to-many like we're doing here, or many-to-many if we start getting more interactive or have multiple sites. So really big picture, but actually I'll go into some detail about the data that we have and just trying to target and say, okay, in this big world of meetings, what are we really trying to do? So I'll try and focus it a little bit. So I really like this next piece. Most busy professionals believe that technology will make meetings easier in the future, and that's certainly a great thing for us to hear. We're a technology company, and so the challenge is, how do we do that while still protecting and maintaining the things that make meetings worthwhile? When you ask people what they like about meetings, they do like having interaction. They do feel it's for team building. There are certain things like that, so you have to obviously be cognizant of what people are doing and what they're getting out of it before you go and try and be a bull through the china shop of meetings. So in that vein, I'm calling this Address the Challenge by Understanding the Status Quo, going out and just saying, what are people doing today? Understanding the pain points. Scheduling is painful. Gosh, for me to figure out, when Joe and Bob and Kay and Imad are all free, I've got to get on the phone, or we've got to email back and forth, or they're if they have free busy, then they're not updating their schedule. It's just painful, especially when you start trying to go outside the organization. If people are on different types of systems, calendaring systems and scheduling systems, it's really painful. We heard over and over again that scheduling is the #1 issue that people would like to see improved in meetings. Bless you. Second, paper documents and handwriting are a reality. People are not going to give up pen and paper right away because we come in with the greatest XYZ solution. It's just something that is comfortable, it's easy to use, and people use it right now. Document sharing may tend to start in email. When people think of sharing documents, they immediately default to email. They might kind of get to, well, maybe a file share, public folders or something, but generally document sharing via email, and then they print it out. Meetings often start, of course, no objective, lack of agenda. It kills people to sit in a meeting and not know where they're going, to walk out of a meeting and say, what did we just do? What was the point of what we were just here for? Simply having an objective can add so much value to keeping people focused on something. And it's just not done very often. People will acknowledge that they wish they had an agenda, but they just forgot to do it, or that they just didn't have the time to do it. So they do realize that it's valuable, either as a meeting organizer or even as a participant, but they just don't get around to it. When we talk about remote meetings, and the definition of remote meetings is one or more people not in the primary meeting location. So anyone who's tuning into this from an external location, or when I'm in Silicon Valley and talking to Jane up here, telephone is king. Why? I mean, it's obvious. It's easy. It's cheap. It's ubiquitous. Everybody has it. You can rely on it. It's not going to give you kind of bad quality or fade out, especially landline phones. And we also learn meetings are rarely connected. People don't always bring devices into their meetings, laptops. They don't have internet connections. A lot of businesses just aren't wired that way, or unwired that way. And a lot of times laptops are considered a barrier for social interaction. And I know this isn't news to you. Having that screen up can really just create a wall between you and your audience or other people, and serve as a distraction. So that asserts the importance of being able to work online and offline when you're talking about not having that connection or not even having the device in the room. And device, I'm kind of defaulting to laptop here, but we can even open it up and think of broader devices. And meetings lack resolution. So kind of going back to the point I said before, what just happened in this meeting? Are there action items? Who's tracking them? I don't know. Are you going to remember in a week that you promised to send me that memo? And key decisions are left unmade, and people are left out of decisions, stakeholders. So that's what's happening. What does it mean? We're starting with the customer needs, and so kind of understanding that and appreciating that to figure out how we're going to build things. So we talked a little bit about this meeting space is really big. So how do we narrow it down? What are we going to address? And when we first were talking about Office.net 2 years ago, one of the big tenets that came out was saving hours, not minutes. And that one is really appropriate to the meeting space because people think of wasting time. So we looked and we said with all of our data, where are people spending the most time? Smaller meetings, 2 to 5 people. It's the most common type of meeting. And so you figure also that any type of solution that you can do for a group of 2 to 5, you could probably scale to a larger group. So if we start our focus there, that's pretty good. And then to prioritize scheduled meetings. like I said, there's a lot of pain in scheduling right now. But the point in scheduling is that people are investing more time if they're scheduling a meeting, right, as opposed to kind of just doing the, hey, Dean, let's go and meet somewhere, right? They're putting a thought in about what is my objective, what is my agenda. Maybe they wish that they would remember to put the thought into that. So scheduling meetings become that much more attractive as a first stop. And again, you could probably scale a lot of the tools that you have for planning the meeting to a more ad hoc scenario. And then there's the importance of inter-company meetings and intra-company meetings. So it's not just about everyone here at Microsoft. It's about how do we reach out and communicate with others, and how do others do the same. So moving into the target customer, this is how we basically went and looked at all this data and tried to figure out, okay, in this great big meeting space with everything that we've learned, who is it that we're going to go after? And we were looking at, again, the three elements, the three stages of meetings, pre, during, post, and the different elements where people are spending time. So I'm going to go through and present in order of priority the targets that we came up with. First is the meeting organizer and participant. So customers who not only organize but also participate in the meetings that they organize. And this is because this is the customer who's most invested right now. This is the user who's invested. They're thinking about, okay, I've got to schedule a meeting. What is it I'm trying to get out? The goal is the agenda. Who do I need to invite? Well, I should probably invite Jane because she knows what's going on. I should probably invite Dean because, well, he knows who else to invite. Or, just putting that thought together. They know the background of the issues being discussed. They know whatever politics might be going on, red flags might be issued, and the anticipated outcome of the meeting. So this is the person who's the thinker behind the meeting, and that's who we want immediately, because that's someone who maybe needs some help with making decisions or remembering kind of what to do to have a good meeting. And kind of that personal investment is what we're after. So there's actually a subset to this, which is the cross-organization meeting organizers. So I talked about the intra-company meeting, but also the inter-company meeting. So this is someone who is going to look not only to schedule meetings with their colleagues, but go outside the organization. So they want to avoid communication breakdowns. They don't want someone to say, gosh, I didn't get the email, and then not show up. They don't want to go, travel somewhere and not have people show up from outside the organization because they didn't get the info or not be prepared. Especially when people are meeting with people outside the company, it's like the level of care gets notched up a little, right? Like, well, I really want to put on my best face here because this is my one time to meet with this guy, and I don't want to be a fool or, any of those different emotions that go into it. So easing coordination is key. So the next priority, and let me just emphasize here that these are not distinct categories. There's going to be overlap, right? The organizer, as a participant, could also, in this case, be a remote participant. But this is just kind of an initial way to categorize and think about these guys. So the remote meeting participant, in this case, these guys are more likely to have access to tools that are going to help them get on the same page as the person in the primary meeting space. They're going to have more license to use things like laptops or devices because they're kind of out of sight. They don't have to worry about that social interaction necessarily, and they've got to work harder to get up to speed with everybody else who's in the main room. They're looking to reach out in a way that's certainly affordable, especially these days, scalable, reliable, user-friendly, and equitable, meaning they want to feel like they're in that same meeting room. So the ultimate goals I've got on here, overcome second-class status and achieve equal ground in the meeting space. Has anyone here participated as a remote meeting participant when they haven't, and they're not in the primary space? It's kind of like the one-man-out situation. Okay, so this yellow thing resonates a little bit, like the second-class citizen. It is hard not being in the primary space. You feel like people aren't listening to you, that they forget you're out there. And that's painful, and that's what we're trying to address, is these pain points.
You've never experienced that.
I never experienced it. It's amazing. I live in California. You all are up here. I never experienced it. So the business traveler, never experienced that either. So here's where we get into this mobility question. And again, of course, this is an overlap with the remote user, but then again, you could have a remote person in another building somewhere in Seattle, so they don't have to get on a plane. We're talking about the road warrior, the mobile worker who's, trying to balance all the different devices and trying to come up with the right tool. And similar to the remote participant, they're expected to maybe have some more tools that are going to help them achieve their goals while they're on the road. they're going to probably be willing to spend a little bit more, too, to get that parity or to be able to stay in touch while they're on the road. I did a study on understanding the difference of face-to-face meetings versus online alternatives. When are people going to choose one or the other? And the big thing comes down to what are your goals, right? What is your meeting goal? Is it to close a sale? If that's the case, get on the plane. Is it to go over your status after you guys just met face-to-face last week? Stay in your office, right? So the thing we have to think about is when is it suitable? When does it make sense to provide alternatives and helping customers make that choice and have the right tools? So especially for the mobile worker, allowing him or her to have the tools to be able to make the choice that, now I need to get on the plane not because I lack the tools, but because I need that face-to-face or I need that handshake at the end of the day. Sure.
Consider the like accountant and clients or lawyer and clients, that kind of scenario where the clients would like to be remote, and there's actually nobody local because they don't really want to travel every time to see the accountant. Was that a priority at all?
In trying to think about what the dynamics are, if it's so kind of a client-customer relationship,
right.
When is it possible for the accountant or the lawyer not to go to the client?
Right.
Okay, I would say that probably falls into the traveler or the remote category, just in terms of kind of going back to what I was just saying. What are the goals? Is it for the accountant to run through some confusing numbers on your tax return that he really wants to make sure that you deeply understand because you're going to get a huge tax bill because you decided to check that box? In that case, he'll probably go ahead and make that decision. It's just kind of the motivation on our side is
Maybe I should say this differently.
Yeah.
Like a WebEx competitor. Was that a priority in this decision?
Which scenario, though? In terms of
the scenario I just explained, sort of a set of remote clients that don't necessarily want to have to go and visit a professional all the time.
Sure. So I would say we're trying to enable any of those types of interactions. So at risk of sounding vague or repetitive, it's being able to provide the tools and flexible tools so people could figure out I can meet with all those people in those remote spaces without having to go, or no, this time I really do need to go because they don't achieve what I'm looking for. Does that answer your question? Okay. So the last target is this ad hoc meeting participant. And again, the fact that these are priority does not demote any in terms of importance at the end of the day. It's just in terms of who can we make the biggest impact with immediately, and then start narrowing our focus a little bit more. So the ad hoc participant is not necessarily going to have as formalized a work process potentially because it's the quick let's have a conversation or let's grab a meeting room, and not necessarily having time to put down the agenda or things like that, but just needing quick tools to get them connected to whatever information or other people that this person needs. So moving from that, any questions? Or I'll kind of do the opportunity piece, and then we can ask some questions if we've got them. So what is the opportunity? We've kind of talked about this whole space and everything, so what does it mean? What's the call to action? And my standing is we've got to build a foundation. Right now we have a lot of different tools kind of all over the place. We've got a meeting request form in Outlook. We have, content creation tools, presentation tools. We have, a bunch of different ways that people can kind of piecemeal pick tools. We need to create some type of meetings foundation, something that says, okay, we understand that this is a process. There's pre, during, post. But we need to kind of pull people in with the stuff that just lays the foundation for a good meeting. So improve scheduling within and outside the organization, distributing and sharing materials. These two things, scheduling and sharing materials, rank the highest on things that office users want to see improved the most. Sharing materials, again, people think of it as email, but obviously there are issues with sharing documents in email, size constraints, email overload, version control, all sorts of things. And so people are looking for alternatives. Prompting use of objectives and agendas. And I want to just emphasize prompting. And I say that word a lot, and probably my team hates it when I say it now. But It's not necessarily going in and saying, here's a great tool to help you think about everything that you want to, cover in your objective. Because there are templates out there that do that. And some of them are used and some of them aren't. It's simply reminding someone, an effective meeting has objective. Oh, yeah, that's right. Let me type that in. Just like an effective meeting has a location. So when you go through your meeting request form, you tend not to forget to put a location because it's there in front of you. So same thing with agenda. The next piece, enabling real-time data and voice connections. And this could be as simple as being able to schedule a phone conference, the same place where you're scheduling people. It's going to the different places to do all this that's difficult. But then as soon as we can go the next step in terms of actually helping establish these different types of data and voice connections. You'll notice that video is not on there. It's secondary. Video is fantastic, but when you talk about what are the tools that I need right now to communicate my main things, it's my voice and it's my data. And so the video is the gravy. And there are certain situations where video is what it is, or it's the main show. But for the majority of meetings, it's the data. And then if you can add the voice, add the voice. That's the meat and potatoes. Managing action items. What is the meeting about? It's about generating next steps, to-dos, right? So capturing and managing your action items. And same with distributing the meeting findings, your minutes, your summary. So that's what I'm calling the meeting basics, or the foundation. And as far as success criteria, what are we looking to build? Not something that is big and heavy and laborious, because meetings take time. Our goal is to save time. So quick, easy to use. Don't make me have to learn something. Make it discoverable. Make it right there. Make my life easier. And integrate the pieces. Put it in one place. I want one place where I can do my scheduling for people, phone, conference, etc. And imagine someone saying, just like they say today, I can't imagine what I do without PowerPoint. Gosh, I can't imagine what I did without the Microsoft Office Meetings tool. My meetings were hell before, and now they're fabulous. That is what I want to hear. They can use whatever language they want. So, okay. Another thing, users make better decisions about needing to have a meeting. I'm just going to pause on that one for a sec, because I remember when we came up with the initial vision with the meetings workspace team, one of the words in the goal was helping people avoid meetings. And I said, no, it's not about avoiding meetings, because meetings are good in some cases. And they said, no, people want to avoid meetings, too many meetings on a calendar. And we had this kind of philosophical tete-a-tete. And I said, okay, we'll help them avoid meetings. But we're going to help them avoid them by making them have the right tools to make the right decision. So it was kind of, my way of skirting around it and just saying, great, they're just going to be better informed. Help them make the decision to avoid the meeting, which could be as simple as saying, I have no objective. Great, toss the meeting. And so last slide, we've got the foundation, now where do we go? And there are lots of exciting things, and this is a lot of what we're excited to talk with you guys about too is, once we've laid the basics, where do we go? Smarter note-taking, summarization of minutes. We've got a team scribbler that's working on a lot of this stuff, and I'm sure you'll hear from them soon. Getting into the rich audio-video, this is where video comes in. Getting that real-time sharing really worked out and nailed. Activity-based services and solutions. How do you help a group brainstorm using technology? How do you help people make decisions? There might be products out there that are books. There might be even some software products. How do we kind of integrate that into the stuff we're doing and help people with their activities that they're doing in meetings? And integration with project management tools. This is something we're hearing from maybe not so much customers, maybe customers who are thinking a little bit more about the implications of meetings as parts of projects. But analysts who look at the space, the meta groups and the Gartners out there are saying, gosh, meetings are an inherent part of projects. How does this all tie together? And so this is something we've got to think about. So again, success criteria. Tools are in one place and they work together. It's an end-to-end experience. I don't have to go hunting for all the things I want to do. It's seamless to move from planning a meeting to running a meeting to summarizing a meeting. It's a process. It's really smooth. It's easy. Big one, remote meetings currently, a nuisance, I'm sure. When people say, oh, we got to loop in Silicon Valley, got to set up the video conference, yada, 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 I'm sure that they're moaning and groaning over here. It's a nuisance. It'll be wonderful when it becomes a natural option and people are like, yeah, just set up. There's going to be someone remote. Great. And then, again, tools provide choices. And this goes back to the question about the accountant scenario, the law scenario, how to conduct the best meeting. You know that there are options out there to accommodate a lot of different meeting scenarios. So what we want are the tools to give them the choices. So with that, I will turn it over to Jane, unless there are any questions in the meantime.
Yeah.
Sure.
You were mentioning that laptops are considered impolite. Do you have any studies on it? Because certainly that doesn't seem true at Microsoft, but I don't know, out in the real world.
Right. Microsoft is atypical of the rest of the world. And actually, I would say in meetings that I attend, I think people who use their laptops are probably among the rudest of the people in the room because they're always doing email, but that's another Microsoft issue. So in terms of actual studies, I don't have numbers to cite. For my customer visits, when I've asked people, do you ever have a laptop in a meeting? Do you ever do things? A lot of people will say it's actually regulated or, it's forbidden by my manager or by the company, by policy to have, laptops open or email open during a meeting. It really will vary by company. But you'll see, and even in Microsoft meetings, if people are all there with their laptops, there is this barrier between people. And sometimes if someone wants to make a point, or if they say they're kind of becoming extra engaged in the meeting, what happens? They close their laptop because it's something that is kind of breaking down the barrier between them. So I'd imagine there are probably studies out there. I'd love to find them and be able to cite some numbers. In the meantime, it's more qualitative and observational. Yep, which is something that Tablet would actually have the data for, because that's one of the things that they're trying to nail, is getting those in meetings.
One thing we're trying to change is that one of the reasons laptops are considered rude in the meeting is that you're not actually using it for the meeting. You're using it to do other stuff. And so it's clear when you're typing away on your laptop that you're not even focused on what's going on in the meeting. So if we make the PC useful in a meeting where it actually contributes to the meeting or helps you get your work done in the meeting, it might not seem so rude. Granted, a tablet's going to be a much friendlier form factor, but if we do our job right, then, bringing a laptop to the meeting doesn't mean, oh, well, guess she's doing email.
By the view that laptops aren't rude, people are rude.
Yep. Okay. Yeah.
Not the computer.
Okay, so if we get the product to fix rudeness in people, I'll give you all my money. Rude drivers, rude people in meetings. So absolutely, and just to reiterate Jane's point, I don't mean to say that I'm wrapping myself up in wires. I don't mean to say that there's no room for laptops in meetings at all. But today, when people have laptops in meetings, unless someone is designated as the note taker and they're typing away and everyone kind of knows what they're doing, it's kind of a mystery as to what goes on behind the screen because you don't really think about what other tools might there be that could be helping someone to progress through the meeting that is causing them to sit there and type away and seem totally disengaged. But as soon as we actually present tools that can help them make the meeting go faster and still participate, is the day when I think laptops are going to be, ushered into meetings, or tablets or some type of device is going to be ushered in. So,
If you can convince people in your meeting that you're actually taking notes, suddenly it becomes okay. You're typing away on your laptop. So if we actually make that part of the solution instead of typing notes in email, that's a first step.
right.
I don't know if can you guys hear me? I guess I
No.
use the microphone.
It's for the remote.
Okay. Oh, for the remote.
Yeah. It's probably a little bit lower, so we can do it here.
Naturally loud. I have no pockets. Maternity clothes have no pockets, unfortunately. We'll see what we can do. How's that? Is that loud enough? Okay. So, Liz gave you an overview of some of the data we've collected, some of the things we've found from customers, surveys, user surveys. I'm going to give you some insight on what we're actually doing in the product space. The first thing I should probably summarize real quickly, and I'm sure you've heard about this, but I'm going to summarize it again, is that we actually have 2 release vehicles. The schedule for Office recently changed. There's Office.net, which is scheduled to ship next year, next spring. And then there's what we're calling right now Office.Longhorn, for lack of a better name, which is the version of Office that will be synced with the next version of Windows. And that will be the following year. So this is not a new situation for Office. We're used to working on 2 releases at once. We did it with Office 95, Office 97. And we have tried to sync with the operating system before. The idea is that Office.net is going to provide new features for Office users within a reasonable time frame. And it's going to take a lot of the things that we had originally planned for our initial Office.net vision and get them to customers really soon. Office.Longhorn is really going to capitalize on the fact that there's going to be this brand new operating system and that we're going to design features that leverage features of that operating system in the next year after Office.net releases. So we have a mission, we have design goals and feature goals for meetings that span both of those releases. We'll start out certain features will debut in Office.net, and we'll expand on them in Office.Longhorn. Fairly obvious, but I felt like I needed to say that up front. So we have this mission. I'm not going to read it word for word, but it's everything Liz said. Another way of saying it is that we really would like to make the PC more useful for meetings, and that means in the Office.Longhorn timeframe, a PC equals Windows and Office. We want to be able to make this thing, this laptop that I brought here, actually work for me and make it feel like it's useful, whether it's a tablet or a laptop. So that is a fairly broad mission. But here are some design goals that we plan on taking throughout both releases. The first one is to keep it simple. In the past, we've had meeting tools. A while ago, there was a tool called NetMeeting. There are other tools that people use in meetings. I type notes in email to myself. But there hasn't been a really good solution that brings all of these things together. So while there's opportunity for lots of meeting tools, what we're trying to do across Office is put these things together into a single solution that really unifies these things and makes them work together well. Another part of keeping it simple is making sure that people don't have to decide, oh, what kind of meeting technically am I going to have? Do I have to choose now when I schedule it if this is an online meeting, or do I have to choose now whether this is going to be a video conference? I may want to have those attributes in my meeting, but we shouldn't have to make users segment meetings depending on what technology they want to use. Any meeting should be connectable. You should be able to get a connected experience from any meeting, and you should have access to all those things in your meeting, whether you planned it all up front or not. So that's simplification in terms of not making the user have to make a bunch of decisions. We want to provide a consistent, integrated in-meeting experience, or not in-meeting, end-to-end experience. So Liz talked about before meetings, during meetings, and after meetings. It's really important that we pull all that together into a single experience so that the user doesn't feel like they have to go one place to plan the meeting, one place to actually be in the meeting in terms of software UI, one place after the meeting. And they're all different experiences, and gosh, how many places do I have to go for just one meeting? We need to solve that, and that's probably one of our biggest challenges in delivering this stuff in Office. And then we have a design goal. This doesn't start out sounding like a design goal, but we need to be able to provide instant access to all the information you need in the meeting, but not have the links to that information essentially take up your whole screen. So we realize meetings aren't about the agenda. I'm not going to make a meeting about an agenda. I use the agenda, but the meeting is about a slide deck, putting together a slide deck, or a budget, or hiring somebody. There's content in the meeting that's separate from my meeting organization. So being able to optimize so that you can actually focus on what your meeting's about, but still get the information you need is a design goal. Some feature goals, and these aren't all of our feature goals, but we want to make sure that we leverage what's available in Office. So Outlook is a primary thing to leverage in terms of scheduling a meeting. That's where people go to schedule their meetings. They may not use the meeting request as much as we like, but they do manage their calendars in Outlook. We want to provide a way to prepare and store meeting-related materials in context. So today, when I want to send a meeting request, sometimes I'll type an agenda in the body of the message. Sometimes I'll type it in Word and attach it. Sometimes I don't have an agenda. I have some documents. Some might live in SharePoint. Some might be on my PC. Some might be in a file share somewhere. Action items, who knows how I record those? I bring a pad of paper and I write those down, and maybe sometimes those action items make it out of my pad of paper and into some mail, and sometimes they don't. In Office, we're trying to provide a unified way of preparing that information so that you can get to it easily during the meeting. Then there's the in-meeting experience, which is what my team is focused on, and just make that in-meeting experience very efficient, optimize for the fact that you're in the meeting, you're conducting a meeting, provide tools that make conducting that meeting easier, getting to the information easier. A couple things that fall into that category is making a great experience for the tablet PC. We talked about that just a little while ago. And another Office app we want to leverage is Scribbler, which is a new note-taking tool in Office. Then we want to make sure that the work you did in the meeting actually makes you more productive and not less productive. One of the big problems I think Liz mentioned is that people sort of think of their daily routine as I have meetings, and then I have my real work. And meetings, boy, they sure do get in the way of my real work. And in fact, the more meetings I go to, the less I am able to get my real work done. We would like to be able to say, wow, I got some work done in the meeting, and I didn't have to have even more meeting overhead after the meeting that gets in the place of my asynchronous work or the work I do outside the meeting. They should flow one right into the other. So making it easy to follow up on what you got done in the meeting is a feature goal of ours. I'm going to talk a little bit about each one of those things. Yeah?
On the previous slide, could you elaborate more on how Scribbler is going to alleviate some of the issues you brought up at the beginning about how everyone ends up taking pen and paper notes during a meeting, and it seems like most lawyers to productivity is able to transcribe those notes, to distribute them, and
right.
or somehow edit those things. How will Scribbler address that scenario?
So the question is how Scribbler is going to address the scenario of making it easier to take notes in a meeting and making it more effective to use Scribbler to take notes rather than a pad and paper.
Basically, it seems like the productivity part is limited because we're relying. You said we will always have pen and paper at the end of the meeting,
sure.
during the meeting. We always have to either transcribe it or file it or do something with it.
Sure.
How does Scribbler do that?
There's a Scribbler team, and they've got a bunch of different scenarios in which note-taking is, their primary concern. Meetings is one of them. The teams that Liz told you about, my team, Brendan's team, a couple of the teams in Office, we're not so much concerned about how Scribbler works, but we want to leverage it if we consider that's the note-taking app in Office. That's the app that's best designed for note-taking, so we will pull that in if you want to use it. We're not going to punish people if they want to take notes some other way, but we're going to optimize for taking notes in Scribbler. So there is an answer to that question, and that's probably a Scribbler talk. And they're coming in May. I can tell you some of the things that we were thinking of that would make Scribbler a little more, put more of a meeting context into Scribbler. So for instance, I'm in a meeting, I bring up Scribbler, and instantly all the stuff you normally write at the top of your notes, like title of the meeting, date, time, who's there, just gets inserted. And then as you take notes, this will be part of the demo, but I won't show this particular feature, but I'll talk about it. We move to a new agenda item, and it makes a little notation in your notes to show where you are, where the meeting is. So there are things we can do to make those notes more relevant in a meeting, but there's more Scribbler-specific stuff about just why it's a better note-taking tool in general that you should probably get from the Scribbler team. Does that answer your question? Okay. And by the way, if anyone else has questions, feel free to just pop your hand up. Should we move on? Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about each one of those feature goals. I won't go into too much detail, but just expand a little bit. One of them, leveraging Outlook, we see that as being really important. That's where people go when they want to schedule a meeting. And that's generally where people go it's one of the places people go when they plan a meeting. So although it might not be the only place people go, it's an entry point that we really want to take advantage of. And one of the things that we're working on right now is how to make it easy to get some of the core things you need to plan a meeting from within Outlook. So an agenda. Right now, there's no really good way to do an agenda in your Outlook meeting request besides typing some text in the body of a message. We would like, across Office, we would like to change that. Being able to have documents that you associate with the meeting. We need a quick and easy way to put that in the context of your meeting request. And Outlook is signed up to actually make the meeting scheduling process easier and better as well. So expect to see some improvement on that in the Longhorn timeframe. Right now, we've made a first step towards that in terms of the meeting workspace, and I'll show you a little bit about that in a few slides. I talked a little bit about every meeting could be a connected meeting. You shouldn't have to say, this is an online meeting. I should be able to send out a meeting request, and then at meeting time, if, someone can't make it, they should be able to just connect. Or if everyone is in the same room, you should have the option to have a connected experience. It shouldn't be something that you designate as, this is an online meeting, I guess I shouldn't go. Meeting planning features, I mentioned creating an agenda, adding documents. There are a bunch of other things that you can do to plan your meeting. You can create discussions, surveys. These are all things that the meeting workspace is working on right now. Pre-meeting action items in case people have to do things to prepare for the meeting, like order lunch. These are things that you can do beforehand and that will add context to your meeting when the meeting actually starts. Meetings workspace is a SharePoint Team Services type of a special subweb where that you can provision from an Outlook meeting request, and you can put all of these things into the meeting workspace to use later in your meeting. I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. The in-meeting experience, being able to connect from your calendar or from your meeting reminder. Once you're in the meeting, being able to access all of this information. How many times have you gone to a meeting and there's some documents that are related, and you spend a lot of time going, oh, where was that? Do you have that? Can you send that to me? Oh, now someone else just came in. Oh, how do I, oh, I didn't print this out. I didn't print enough copies. Oh, I know that doc, but I don't remember where I put it. Hold on, let me look for it. It'd be nice if all of that were just right there for everybody. And that's what we mean by easy access to all the meeting-related information. We really want to focus on the content of the meeting. If I'm coming here to do a slide presentation, I want you to see the slide presentation. But if you want to know how many people are here and you're connected, you should be able to find that out. If I mention some related material, some reference material, if you're connected, you should be able to access that really quickly just by being connected to the meeting. If you've got action items or notes you want to take, you should be able to do that right from the meeting experience as well. Synchronous or asynchronous viewing experience. This is something we want to bring into the in-meeting experience. And when I say synchronous or asynchronous, I mean an example of synchronous is I'm giving a PowerPoint presentation, and anyone who's connected, whether they're in the room or outside the room, can see that same PowerPoint presentation as I'm giving it. They see the slides advance. They see, when I'm doing a demo, there may be a video in that slide presentation. They get to see that as I'm showing it. Asynchronous would be they want to jump ahead in the deck and see what's coming up. They want to make some notes for themselves and their own copy of the presentation. And then maybe they want to snap back to where I am, where the presenter is. So more tools like that are something we definitely want to try and provide. Symmetrical collaboration is an example of that. Is we both have the same thing on both sides, and we can co-edit a document. But it's not like application sharing is today in sort of real-time application sharing where one person's just getting a view and the other person actually has the real app. This is a little bit confusing, and I don't think I'm going to go into this much further. And then finally, be able to work with the data in such a way that it's actually useful after the meeting. So be able to capture things as you're going, such as brainstorming information, how far you got on the agenda, who was there, who came in late. What about notes? My personal notes, group notes. Someone might be taking group notes. Action items, lists that you make, diagrams, brainstorming lists. It'd be nice if that were automatically captured so someone didn't have to play scribe. Persisting the meeting results, having meeting minutes at the end of the meeting. It would be nice if they were sort of auto-generated based on events that happened in the meeting. If you were capturing that stuff, wouldn't it be nice if at the end of the meeting there was just a button that said, send auto-summary to everyone in the meeting? That just saved me half an hour of going back to my office and typing up notes and sending it out. Access to the working docs. You may have a working meeting, which is let's create a document. Let's work on a slide deck together. It would be nice to be able to persist that slide deck, access to that slide deck as a working document that you can go to later and continue working on asynchronously. Action item follow-up. Be great to be able to take those action items and say, put them into Outlook as tasks. Send them to the appropriate people as their tasks. Be able to have some background intelligent work that actually follows up on some action items. Maybe sends you a notification if you miss a deadline. And then pre-populating follow-up meetings with evolving materials, meaning we want to have a next meeting. It pulls everything from the meeting we're in, throws it into a meeting request, including the progress from the meeting you just finished, and sends it out automatically. Those are some examples of persisting meeting results. There are undoubtedly more. So in Office.net, our first steps at sort of achieving all of these things is the meeting workspace. We're which I already told you is a SharePoint subweb. The target customer, as Liz said, is the first priority target customer is the meeting organizer, who is also a participant. There are different places you can create a meeting workspace. One of them is Outlook. That's probably the primary way. But you can also create it from SharePoint. And the big thing it lets you do is like put all these materials together before the meeting, have them stored in one single place, and then you can go to the workspace during the meeting and access them, which you can do from a link in your meeting reminder or from the calendar, or there'll also be links on SharePoint. So this is a screenshot. This isn't final design, and I'm sorry for the small type, and there are two screens, so you're only going to get me in front of one of them. Here's an example of a meeting workspace. It's got a couple different, and I know I'm going to use the wrong terminology here. I call them, what are they, modules?
Parts, web parts.
Are they just parts? Okay, they're web parts. There's one. Here's the objective. This was pre-prepared when the meeting request was sent out. Here's attendees, which was taken from the people on the to line of the Outlook request. When you go to the meeting workspace, you actually get to see some presence information, and you can invite someone else from here. I expect there'll be other things you can do from these attendees as well, pivot on the presence. The agenda ends up in here. I can edit the agenda from here as well. And then there's a list of documents. All this stuff is in one place, neatly accessible. I can get to it from my meeting. There are other things. I could have a survey in here. I could have a discussion in here. What are some of the other things, Liz?
You've got the minutes tab on there. You've got
right. So I could have a survey for lunch. Is actually a separate tab called Lunch Options that I could be running asynchronously. Sorry to interrupt you. Meeting minutes, a place to keep meeting minutes. This is a SharePoint site that is completely devoted to meetings. And there are different designs, different templates you can use. This is just a basic one. So this is what we're doing in Office.net. This is the first release. Any questions?
Is this inside the firewall? Is that?
This is wherever the SharePoint server for the person who organized the meeting is. So originally in Office.net, we had planned on having a service. We planned on hosting SharePoint servers in the cloud, and you could host one up on the internet with our service. We have cut that for Office.net. It's something that's going to be considered for Office.Longhorn. But yeah, I mean, that's an issue. Firewalls, of course, always come into play when we talk about connected meetings. Yes?
How do you finesse issues like, I mean, there may be documents that are relevant to one side of the meeting, particularly in kind of people from different companies where one side wants to bring it, but they don't want to share it with another side. Like sales meeting, I might want my budget documents with me, but I don't necessarily want the other guy to see that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. That's relevant, but there's a whole spectrum of confidentiality or indeed in the meeting notes itself. There might be the formal part of the meeting notes, but I might be typing in, this guy's a bozo, he's not going to buy, this is a waste of time. Those aren't things you would necessarily want to share.
So the question is, how do I deal with permissions
there's information that's common to everybody. What we had for lunch is not really, that kind of confidential, but there are things that, different sub-parties may or may not want to share with. That's hard to finesse.
How do I distinguish between documents that are relevant to me and documents that are relevant to everybody, or documents that are accessible only by me?
Not just documents.
Not just documents, files, information.
Some of the meeting. You had mentioned earlier that the meeting might automatically be online. And I might be having a discussion with some people and not realize that somebody who's not in the room has clicked in and isn't invited to the meeting, but I might not want privy to the discussion I'm having at that moment.
So I'm going to take a stab at answering that on a few different levels, and Liz, you might want to add some comments in there right now. Right now, the documents we put on the meeting workspace are meant to be documents for everyone in the meeting. There's definitely potential to bring that to different levels of granularity that we will explore, but this is the current plan. One thing we will do is leverage DRM. So if you don't have access to that, if you're never supposed to see that document and I put it in this list, you're still not going to be able to see. We'll honor the DRM properties on that document. Now, there are some loopholes that need to be figured out, like screenshots, but we will apply that to application sharing as well. So if I have this document list, and let's say I can open the doc, but no one else can, and I try and share that out, we're going to try and do, make a best effort to not, to not let me share it if it's got that DRM property on it. I don't know if that part's going to happen in the Office.net timeframe, but that's a goal of ours. In terms of access to the meeting, I said every meeting is a connected meeting. You shouldn't have to do anything. That doesn't mean there aren't settings that you can change. So default setting might be public, anyone can join. But there will be a way to say, no, only the people on the 2 line can come to this meeting. It can connect.
The defaults are crucial here. And
it's a huge issue that you're talking about, and we're talking about lots of different meetings, right? Especially when you start going external. So I'm just going to say where this is right now, we're talking about open sharing, right? Permissions is huge. We have someone who has doused herself in permissions stuff, trying to get to the thing of what happens if I store my personal notes in there. I write on there, can't believe what a jerk Bill is being. I certainly don't want Bill to see that. It's a huge thing, and so we're thinking, okay, is this the right place to store personal notes? I mean, our goal might be, we want everything related to that meeting to be in this place, and so I have my iteration of this, you have your iteration of this, and kind of store our personal documents there. But those settings have to be airtight, right? So I want to know that if I post a document there that's a personal document that the customer's not supposed to see, that it's branded simple, that they're not going to see it, which I don't know if customers are ever going to feel really comfortable with that, putting private documents in the same place as they put these shared documents. That's a level of permissions and settings that is going to be next level. I would say right now this is the common central point for materials that are meant to be shared.
Is there an easy way at the moment to take a Word doc that may have all sorts of personal comments on them, drafts, and lift just the final version and put that without any of the history into this share?
That's an interesting question.
That's a Word issue, right, with the whole Word revisioning thing, and I couldn't answer that. I'd hope that they're going to fix that too, but I don't know the answer.
Yeah, obviously there's a lot of opportunity for creating and enforcing more permissions for these things, and the more features we add, the more we're going to have to do that. I think most of that is in the Longhorn time frame and not the Office.net time frame, although we'll certainly do the best we can not to make this like a totally huge threat, security threat.
Right. So really the first thing on this is that, people, sorry, I don't want to tune out the side of the room, people are looking for a central storage, right? And the main element of meetings is sharing and collaborating. And so the first thing we want to solve is what is everyone supposed to see? And so this is the first iteration, be it simple, but it is kind of meeting what we're looking for, the simple, easy to use central location, and it's kind of the drop point for a lot of different pieces.
You had a question.
Yes. During the meeting, what kind of display technology you were expecting?
Do
you assume there's a shared display, like a projector screen that everybody can see? Or you assume everybody has a laptop or tablet PC that they have their own view of the meeting?
So in the Office.net time frame, the in-meeting experience is pretty much this. So people can go to the web page and look at this if they want to. And that doesn't assume any projector or special, display capabilities. If you have your own laptop, you can look at it. If you don't, and someone chooses to project it on a screen, great. I don't think we have any hard and fast rules as far as that's concerned. In the Longhorn time frame, I think we'll have more options available to us, such as Mira and Mira projectors. We would like to leverage the conference room PC attached to projector, wireless projectors. If people all bring tablets, they should have a great experience too. So as far as if you personally want to be connected, you need to have your own PC or PC-like thing, such as Mira, a Mira device. If you want people in your room who don't bring PCs to be connected or at least have a shared visual experience in the meeting, then a projector comes into play. But we're exploring these options. We're in M0 planning for the Longhorn product right now, so that kind of gives you an idea of where we are with our thinking.
Yeah, and also, kind of going back to the target customer too, and focusing on that meeting organizer. And at least in the presentation right here of the meeting workspace, we're still thinking about that organizer, right? So the person who is trying to deal with the scheduling, trying to deal with the sharing of documents, trying to deal with the issues before the meeting ever happens and before things like your questioning would come into play. So I want to kind of keep this within the context for which it was intended, which is solving that big chunk of time, which is how do we really simply help a meeting organizer plan his or her meeting by prompting better meeting behaviors and giving simple tools that will help organize information. And so that's really the main goal of this right now. That was the starting point.
Yes.
So in today's meeting, for taking notes, paper is king right now.
Yep.
Collaborating, real whiteboards, not digital whiteboards, are king.
Yep.
For remote, it's telephone. Do you guys have like a legacy story or sort of incorporating some of these other media?
Yeah, so the question is, do we have a story for incorporating legacy meeting, like physical whiteboards, pen and paper, things that people use today? That's a tough question. It's kind of a yes and no question, and it depends on what you think of as legacy. Certainly this would be legacy. I know there's a group in research that's working on that, and we would like to, and we're exploring opportunities of incorporating that stuff in. Some people think of net meeting as legacy. I kind of do. I worked on it. If someone has an electronic whiteboard, or a Mimeo, how do we incorporate that? Great questions. That's one of the big things we're actually investigating in the Longhorn planning is, do we make this experience extensible so that lots of meeting tools that we don't create can plug in easily? Yes?
I'm just thinking about the meeting that we're in right now, where you're the presenter and you present to the exclusion of all other functions on your device.
Uh-huh.
And I've been in a lot of meetings where the person who's presenting has to have a pad there so that they can take notes and be presenting at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see how, even if you had note-taking capabilities, how you would do it on your single device right now.
Yeah, actually, Jonathan and Liz and I had a conversation kind of similar to this in mail about multi-mon support, and being able to sort of have presenter's view and presentee's view, such that I could have access to meeting information, take notes, and yet show the slides, and you don't see my notes necessarily.
We're seeing all of those PowerPoint notes that, I make PowerPoint notes, but then I have to print them out so that when I have the things on screen, I can be referring to my paper notes on the side.
Sure.
Of the presentation.
Sure. It's definitely something we're investigating. It's a Longhorn time frame thing. Steve?
I guess this might be kind of an outlook question, but are you guys looking at doing anything for resource scheduling? So, for instance, I could find a conference room with certain characteristics. I mean, I know Active Directory has the ability in its own cryptic way to do that, but is that something for the pre-meeting that you guys are looking to incorporate?
So the question is whether we're pursuing resource scheduling in Outlook, and the answer is yeah, that's part of the redesign effort that's going on between us, Outlook, and the Meetings Workspace team to be able to incorporate everything you need in that planning phase. And if you need to make sure that you book a room that's got a ring cam, or make sure you book a room that's got certain capabilities, then that we should be able to do that in one meeting request or one meeting planning experience.
It's also in the Kodiak vision, so the next version of Exchange. They're the ones actually, I think, owning that the most.
Any other questions? Yes?
Also, the hard part about meeting is that everybody has to be there at the same time in the same room, or not necessarily, but at the same time. It will be good to provide some technology that allow people to come and go as they wish, and maybe have some technology to bring them up to date of what's already happened during the meeting.
Yep, and that's actually that third user group that Liz was talking about, the remote user. Whether they're in the next, in their office down the hall, or in California, or in London, we would like to make that experience as close to being in the room as we possibly can, and be able to have them sort of survey the meeting, whether they're an invited participant or whether it's a type of meeting where they could be sort of a lurker and kind of come in and go, oh, you're not at the interesting part yet, I'll leave and do some email and I'll come back later. That would be great. That, again, is in the Longhorn time frame as well.
For example, actually, in the next version of the Windows Media Player, there's a time compression option where you can play back whatever is recorded faster.
Yep.
So assume a person come in 10 minutes later, he can speed up what's being recorded from the beginning of the meeting and quickly go through what has already happened. And maybe 10 minutes later, he caught up to the real time of the meeting and be able to interact with the real-time participants at that point.
Area for innovation. Yeah, I have that actually identified as yes, this is an opportunity for us. we don't specifically have it planned. It's something we'd like to explore. There's one question over here.
Yeah, what is your thinking about support in meeting for process, consensus building, or decision support? So, I've been in this case where everybody in the room agrees, but I don't really know it until someone says, well, we already know that, or we all agree on that.
That's yet another tool that we can add to the in-meeting experience that, hopefully in planning we will prioritize something like that and figure out what that thing looks like and incorporate it in a way that everyone can use it. I don't have a specific slide on something like that, but that's a good idea.
Yeah, I would put that into what I was calling earlier activity-based products where it's decision making or brainstorming. The folks in Visio are working on a brainstorming tool. Flow charting is very appropriate for things like decision making as well. Consensus building thus far has been the WebEx quick make a poll option, and we find that users don't really use it. It's kind of hard, I guess, in a meeting to kind of jot that stuff together, but still there's this concept of how do you figure out if everyone is in violent agreement. And so we actually think of that even as a potential pre-meeting tool where you can have some type of vote or consensus building event which can help you avoid the meeting altogether. So, but those are around specific activities, and absolutely there's opportunity in helping kind of with the logic in that, in kind of different stages of the meeting.
Yep. So one thing I'd like to do, we're still going to have time for questions. I only have a couple more slides, so I'd like to get through them and then leave the questions till the end, if that's okay. So Longhorn, I didn't say Office.Longhorn features. I called them thoughts because we're in M0 planning, and as we know, I won't commit to anything till we actually have it ready to go. But one of the things we want to add in Longhorn is more of a live, connected experience. And one of the features we have is something we call the meeting console, which I'll demo. Don't know if this is actually going to be what we have, but it's something that we've been playing with that we hope will help illustrate some of the goals that we're trying to meet here. And one-click access to stored meeting materials. We have that in the meeting workspace. We'd like to take that a step further and optimize that for an in-meeting experience as well as have the meeting workspace. That includes RTC support. So why are we waiting till Longhorn to do this? We have, there's RTC stuff out today. Well, it turns out that the scenarios we want to support are going to require some technology that won't be available till Longhorn. So things that come from the, excuse me?
What's RTC?
RTC, real-time collaboration and communication. I'm glad you asked me that because people have different understandings of what that means. So things like real-time audio and video, document sharing using terminal services, a multi-point server that I can connect to that will allow me to have real-time features with people outside of my firewall. So being able to have a video conference with someone from Boeing, let's say. The Windows team is actually working on a server that will allow that to happen. They're also, the Windows RTC team has audio-video technology they're working on for Longhorn. Terminal services and what used to be NetMeeting application sharing are merging the application sharing technology and terminals and the RDP technology, so we have one real-time data sharing thing at Microsoft, which will be great. We want to wait till that comes together before we start exposing that in Office. So that's why we're waiting. Flexible storage model, something we're investigating. Right now, we're storing things in a meeting workspace. We've had questions about, well, what's the offline experience? What if I just, and you asked, what if I just have things on my PC that I don't necessarily want to put up there? We'd like to be able to leverage those things as well. We need to explore, if that's a possibility, how we can do that. Certainly meetings workspace is a core part of the storage story for meetings. And then seamless experience, I keep harping on this. I put it down again with a little asterisk because throughout all of this planning and trying to provide people with information and meeting tools, we have to make sure that we provide a really nice integrated solution that doesn't seem like we just threw a toolbox at people yet again. So we always keep coming back, and I see our usability guy in the back row smiling because that's his big thing too. So, demo. I'm going to demo this Uh-oh, I lost the video. Of course, right when I do this. My computer went to sleep and the video disappeared. We'll try it again. And I'm going to plug the other laptop in here. So what I did here was I went to Outlook and I scheduled a meeting using Outlook meeting requests, and I had an option to enable conferencing. I know I said you shouldn't have to do this, but the way we have it in the code today, you do. And then at meeting time, a reminder came up, and I got an option to connect. So I connected. Please work. I didn't make any sacrifices to the demo god, so anything could happen. So this is what we're calling the meeting console. Sorry for the blinkiness over there. All it is a heads-up display of all the stuff in your meeting. And we don't know if it's going to look like this. Right now it's pretty rough. But I'll walk through some of the features. The important thing is that it took all the things that I planned before the meeting and put in the meeting workspace or in my meeting requests and pulled them into sort of one easy access place. I've got, for some reason the screen's kind of moved over. Immediately I can see how many people are here in the meeting, and 3 of 5 present. I invited 5 people, 3 people are connected, and I can actually, if I want to see the list, I can bring that up, show attendee list. Here are all the people I invited. Just took it from the Outlook meeting request. And I see some things about who's connected. So I've got 3 people connected. And I might have the other 2 people, Jeff, in the room. Obviously, he's not connected. I'll just check him off. Roy couldn't make it. He's not here. People that are connected have an indicator. We've assigned them a color with some UI that we need to work on, so that when we're doing some collaborative sharing, everyone's got their little remote pointer color. I can identify them. And then we have a column called AV caps, whether I can do audio and video with people. I can go back and get information. I can pivot on these people and do things like send them email, send them a private note, start video with them. I can invite other people to the meeting from here. I can invite other people from the main console. And I can start one-on-one video with the 2 people who in my meeting who are connected who can do that. I had this going before. I'll try it again. Oh, bummer. Well, normally that video window you saw for a second would show up with Stephen in it, and it seems to have crashed. We'll see if we can figure out what happened. We have some tools for running the meeting. The first thing we can do is show a description. If I typed a description in the meeting request, I could bring that up in a window. Agenda, if I had an agenda in the meeting workspace, I could bring that up. And this is a little bit different than an agenda as I would look at it in the meeting if I just brought up the meeting workspace. We've actually assigned some times to agenda items, and there's a timer counting down. And I would get notification if I ran overtime on a certain item, which I know in a meeting this morning would have been really helpful. And by walking through this agenda online, I can check off things. I can choose to ignore the toolbar, which is obviously not done. I can choose to skip an item. It will move on to the next item. It will record the fact that I finished that item or I skipped it, timestamp it, and have that information available for some sort of meeting summary. Move to this item. It starts counting down that item. You'll also see if I don't want to bring up the agenda, I can get just some really limited information in the console itself if I don't want to take up the space. Some documents. Here are some documents I put in the meeting workspace. I can bring them up. Right now I have some pretty limited options, but there are a bunch of things I could do with those documents. One's a slide deck. I could present it to everybody. I might just have available for opening it and reading it on my own if I happen to have my own laptop or tablet in the meeting. I might want to get in there and edit it and then send copies out. There are a bunch of things I could do with these documents. Right now it's just kind of a flat list.
You drag things into it? You didn't have your PowerPoint ready until a minute before.
Not today, but that's, yeah, something, being able to add more documents to that list is definitely something we'd like to do. Right now, these documents live in the meeting workspace. Actually, these particular documents in this demo I just attached to the meeting request, which is what people do today, and we put them there. But if I had put them in the meeting workspace, we'd have, or if I had a hybrid, some in my meeting request, some in the meeting workspace, it would show them all there. So that's documents. Take Scribbler notes. That's not going to be the name of the feature, but I do this, Scribbler launches, I take some notes. I talked about how I could insert some information besides the date. I can end the meeting from here. Application sharing, which we really shouldn't be calling application sharing, but sharing documents. It knows the last thing I had open and can provide some intelligent context-sensitive commands to actually share that doc. If I brought up PowerPoint, it then gives me the option to share a PowerPoint. If I wanted to give a presentation, I just did this thing called auto hide. Get the console out of the way. Put this in slide mode. Here I am giving my presentation. If I want to access, well, now that's not working. Usually the console would just slide right in. Oh well. I won't demo that anymore. Get rid of that. I can bring up a whiteboard. Scribble on a whiteboard. This is pretty much the net meeting whiteboard. There's definitely opportunity for other whiteboard type plugins here. Right now we're just showing the one we have. One of the things people do in meetings, if they're in the same room, they sometimes pass each other notes or they'll type IM to each other. We'd like to provide a tool so people can send private messages during the meeting. Or if you have to post a message to everybody, that's helpful. That's where the send a note is. And there are two people who've already sent me notes. So I can bring up my notes with Stephen. Okay. I don't know what happened with this video, but I could find out from here. Action items, if we had action items already started in the meeting workspace, we could bring those up, add to them, assign people to them. Those would get persisted back into the meeting workspace for follow-up later. Schedule a follow-up meeting, I mentioned what that does. And then I could actually open the meeting workspace if I wanted to go to the meeting workspace as well. So these are some of the things. And a notification. Let's see if that worked. Which obviously we didn't design very well for this because I didn't even notice it. We'll just see if this works just for the fun of it. Looks like no. That's an example of an in-meeting experience. Obviously not finished yet, but hopefully you can see the potential of being able to plug things in and have some easy access to your meeting data while allowing maximum space for whatever you're focusing on in the meeting. I'm going to go back to the slides.
How different is this from the existing product, like WebEx? How different is this kind of product?
How different is it?
Yeah.
Well, technology-wise or user experience-wise, or it's very different technology-wise.
This competes against the
absolutely
WebEx, right? So I'm wondering how you differentiate yourself from those applications, from those products.
We compete on the scenarios, definitely. I think the customer segments may be a little bit different, our target customers, in that WebEx kind of caters to the sales and marketing person. Sort of the, I'm giving a demonstration of my product online. Anyone want to come see? That's a pretty common scenario. The biggest thing that WebEx offers is connectivity. Right now, Microsoft does not have a good solution for B2B real-time meetings, real-time remote meetings.
You also can share documents.
Yep, and so that includes data sharing, stuff through the firewall. What we're going to get from the Windows team is that connectivity, so we'll be able to pull that into the experience. We hope to beat WebEx on the experience and be able to bring the power of Office in, which one thing WebEx doesn't have is really much integration with the environment people work in. It's kind of this whole separate thing. And also, it's pretty much a web app built on Java, so it's kind of limiting in the things you can do. But the thing they do kick butt on is connectivity. So to the extent that we can get good connectivity solution from Windows, we'll match or beat them on that.
Do you have any kind of cross-platform story, Mac or stuff like that? Are you going to think about that?
That's a good question. Right now, you got to have Office.Longhorn to do this. There needs to be a down-level story, since I can send a meeting request to anyone. We're figuring out what that is. There may be a viewer or something you can download. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a question we're going to have to answer. Yes?
So what are you doing in the connectivity area, or what is it that's going to enable it? Because, I mean, NetMeeting and the RTC client today are pretty useful in meetings.
Yep.
If I could ever get them to connect to each other.
Yep. So in Office, we're not doing anything. In Windows, Windows RTC team is looking to do cross-firewall solutions through servers, through relay servers, through different protocols that will actually go through the firewall. I think they're in sort of an architecting stage right now for the Longhorn timeframe. Right now, they use SIP for audio-video. They're looking for ways to get that through the firewall. It's a tough question. I mean, even WebEx hasn't figured out a good way to do multi-point audio-video through the firewall. What they do is they tunnel. They tunnel over it.
Even connect them when we're not behind firewall.
Right. So tunneling works fine if your IT department doesn't catch on. As soon as they find out you're tunneling that kind of data over HTTP or HTTPS, they get mad and filter it out. So yeah, that's possible. It's technically possible to do that. It's rapidly becoming an unacceptable solution. So we need to figure out a better way to do it. But that is a Windows networking initiative right now. And when they do that, we will be more than happy to put that into our meeting experience, for the RTC part anyway. This is my second to last slide. Here's some areas where we have an opportunity to innovate, where we don't have specific features planned, but an opportunity where these are opportunities that you guys might have to help us. Conference call integration. People have conference calls. Sometimes they think of them as meetings, sometimes they don't. In the scenario that I demoed, we kind of assume you're on the phone. We don't think that chat is going to be your primary mode of communication, especially for people who aren't in the room. If people aren't there, you're on the phone. It'd be really nice if we could incorporate that in and integrate that into the solution. I know the Windows RTC team is investigating some infrastructure solutions to that, but it's an area where we could actually add a lot of value. More symmetrical collaboration tools. So application sharing. Oh, I forgot to demo application sharing. Someone was sharing a document, but we've actually done some new things in application sharing to make that work better. Application sharing is asymmetrical. I have the doc. I share it out. You don't get a copy of the doc. You get a picture of the doc. You get kind of a limited experience. It'd be nice if we were actually both running Word, both working on the same document. There's definitely opportunity to get into that and provide better tools for symmetrical collaboration. And document editing is just one of them. Integrating structured data from line of business apps. Right now we're looking at the document list that has documents in it. But more and more people are using web apps that bring in structured data. We need to be able to leverage that information in the meeting without having to make a document out of it. So we're looking at ways to do that. I'm talking to the XDocs teams. I'm sure there are other opportunities we haven't thought of. Wireless P2P. Right now, that console you saw, I connected to that through a server. Well, what if we're just, what if I'm at a conference or a trade show and we walk into a hotel room and we want to be able to use Office meeting tools, but we don't have access to the corporate net or to a server. Can we do something there? I don't know. What if we don't even have access to the meeting workspace? Is there something we can do? I think there's opportunity there. Intelligent information retrieval during the meeting. This is something that actually just came up today, and I just added it into the slide. But let's say we're having a discussion, and someone says, "Oh, we need to get that data on how many people use Outlook Calendar today." And I type that into an action item. What if there was some natural language search that went on in the background, and I got a notification that says, 36 items retrieved from your corporate net? I could go back to it later in the meeting. That would be kind of cool. Multi-point audio video. The video I demonstrated was I could only have video with one person. It'd be great if we could pull that in. Similarly, the ring cam stuff. If you have that equipment, you should be able to use it within the context of the in-meeting experience. And then broadcasted, recorded meetings. I think you kind of touched on this. What if the whole meeting experience was recordable and archivable and time-stamped, and you were able to go back and take notes on it, annotate? These are all opportunities. Right now, we've been kind of focused on smaller meetings, but a meeting like this, or it would be nice to be able to broadcast it and use all these tools. Yeah, Rico.
Jen, a quick one. This is not meant to be in a priority order, right? Those
Absolutely
are
not.
Things that, okay.
This is random list of stuff. Representative of week 1 of M0 planning. Yes. This was meant to be more thought-provoking than the complete list, and no, we're not doing anything else, and this is the only thing we're doing. So this is just examples. So what's the call to action? What can you guys do? Think about whether what you're working on applies to these scenarios. Thinking about what you're working on could help us. There's tons of room for tons of opportunity for innovation here. The teams that are working on this are not huge, and certainly we welcome any ideas or work that you guys are doing that you think might be related. And if you are working on meeting-related stuff, does it fit in with this model? Does it sort of fit in with these goals? I'd be really interested in hearing that. And then finally, if it does, we have contacts. There's Liz and I. There's Brendan Bush, who is a GPM of meetings team down in California, and he owns the meeting workspace. And Jeff Wilson, who's in the back of the room, who's our usability engineer. And we'd certainly be willing to set up further discussions, further meetings with you to talk about some of the opportunities.
And actually, if I could just jump up, I love the question you just asked in terms of priorities.
Yeah.
And Jane and Jeff can attest. We sat in a meeting this morning talking about planning and things, and every other statement out of my mouth was, what's the customer need? What's the customer need? And so we're talking about driving priorities. It's all about what's the customer need.
Yep.
And so that's when I was giving my presentation and saying we've got to have a foundation, a basic foundation. That's what you saw with the meeting workspace, I think, in terms of just getting the right information in the right place. And now it's time to start thinking about the next steps. And I'll put a little plug in. I am in the final stages of authoring a big meetings opportunity map paper where I'm talking about the priorities and going through a workflow of meetings and saying, this is what someone does and makes a decision. Are we going to have a meeting? Yes, no. And these are all the different ways that you could kind of go through the meeting process. And in going through, I'm trying to map the customer data, trying to match, which competitors might be addressing the space, and then going through and trying to prioritize. What are the hottest areas? What are the things we must have? Basics and then going into the exciting areas. So I'm all about trying to help prioritize that stuff because there's a lot of exciting things going on, and a lot we're just throwing out here today. There's a lot of investigation, what we can do. So once that paper is polished off, I will be thrilled to broadcast it out to everyone and see thoughts and feedback.
And another note on opportunity, really Office.net, as Liz said, we're trying to get the basics down, things we know we can do today with SharePoint and what we had going in Office.net, and really trying to sort of take those first steps and getting people more organized for meetings and giving them access to information. The Office.Longhorn release is all about sort of big bang features and new stuff that people have never seen before that says, oh my gosh, I have to have both of these products. So where for shorter term releases, you may have heard, we're not ready for that. Longhorn release, we want to look at that stuff. We want the cool, new, innovative stuff. And obviously, I did not list everything on that one slide. There's tons of stuff that I didn't list and probably haven't even thought of. So if you guys have ideas, we really want to hear them. Yes?
So any thoughts and plans on how to bring up the remote participants from secondary system up to first? Any plans or?
So the question is how to make remote participants be less of a second-class citizen. Making the better RTC tools is one step. Giving them better access to the information in a meeting is another step. I'm sure there's definitely more we can do. Some of the multimedia stuff, trying to I'm going to back up a little bit. One thing we found out is when people really want to have a face-to-face meeting, they're going to have a face-to-face meeting. This is not meant to replace all business travel. But there are some meetings that you can get away with not traveling for. I mean, how many times have you flown across the country for like a 2-hour meeting and gone, that was kind of a waste of my time. I really wish we could have just done this over the phone. But there were some visuals, or there was some intense discussion, or some key decisions that need to be made where it was really better to be face-to-face. Those are some borderline cases that we'd actually like to try and attack with this stuff and see if we could make people shift.
So like some thoughts about that in terms of specific implementation. I think Jane touched on the big one, which is getting them the information. That's the start, right? To know what's the flow of the meeting, who's going to be there, and how can I prepare, at least have the right materials. If I'm not in the room for the handout, can you at least have it posted somewhere so I can have a printout available? That's the basis. And I think the next piece starts getting a little bit more to the social and human dynamic of, you know, I'm on the far end. You can't tell that I just took a breath because I was going to make a comment.
Yep.
And so I'm sitting there frustrated because I can't jump in and talk because there's a very rich conversation going on. And I talked with Jonathan about this. You know, the attempts have been made to show some type of hand-raising mechanism. Doesn't necessarily work. You know, maybe there's another way to do that. What is the right implementation to bring that person from second class to being an active participant? And I know there's awesome work with stuff that you guys are doing with, I'm going to get all the terminology wrong, but, you know, with fake heads and, you know, different,
fake head group? Anyone in the fake head group?
But very, very exciting work, which starts to elevate that person to being more active in a visual way that doesn't necessarily have to be face-to-face video, but still recognizes that there's another person participating.
Yep. How can we provide visual indicators of what's going on one side versus what's going on the other side?
Right.
Avatars. Fake heads.
That's what it really is.
Jonathan?
You could just tell me who was talking in a regular phone call.
Yep.
Right. That would go a huge way.
John has had a question for like the last hour. So.
At the beginning, you just mentioned the 2 to 5 focus. I was just wondering, did we see anything that was really limited to 2 to 5, or what was the 2 to 5 constraint?
That's a great question. You were paying very good attention and you got me. Because I think where we are today in the implementation is not necessarily targeting that 2 to 5 person meeting unless it's a very organized group of 2 to 5 people that meet on a recurring basis and are very good about agendas. My guess is that the tool as it's currently designed would appeal more to a larger group where there's more organization and planning. So in that case, I'd say it's failed in hitting that primary target, and I think it would be used in less cases.
Well, I think that's good. I think there are a lot of maybe more larger meetings.
Absolutely. But kind of digging the next level in that, you say, okay, what are the pieces in there that would appeal to a 2 to 5 person meeting? And that's where I get into the prompting behavior. So if there's a lightweight way to remind someone to do an objective and an agenda for a 5-person meeting, that's a win. And it's something that could be as easy as just adding an extra little piece of dialogue and a meeting request form. And that will go a lot further in addressing a 2 to 5 person meeting without any type of fancy tool. So in a lot of cases, there's probably more opportunity in the bigger scenarios. So yeah, exactly. It's not the right now.
Definitely the stuff we have today to work with works better for smaller meetings. That's not to say there's an opportunity to support larger meetings. It's just that we recognize that we were limited to some tools that really worked best for smaller meetings, just in the short term, in the original Office.net time frame.
And what works? I mean, the things like project management applications, and as Liz was saying, agenda and action item tools, those seem more useful actually, potentially for larger meetings.
Sure.
Even brainstorming, you get a lot more people. So
yeah, some of the real-time stuff didn't translate too well.
Sorry. To get to the 2 to 5 person, that is, I think, where you're going to start looking, maybe when you're beyond the agenda and objective and you're looking at the in-meeting tools, what is it that's going to help people potentially get work done during the meeting? Is it going to be getting decisions made? Is it going to be being on the same page as you're going through a presentation? Is it going to be looping in that remote participant who's the 5th participant and keeping him an active part of the conversation? So in terms of volume of meetings, that's why the 2 to 5 comes in, not because it's necessarily a more important meeting, but because it happens more often, and therefore, if we want to make the bigger impact and affect the most users, that's where. So it's not scale of impact per se.
Five people, you can have 5 plus 0, or 4 plus 1, or 3 plus 1 plus 1.
Mm-hmm.
Which one is more often indoors?
Right now, the majority of meetings happen 5 plus 0. I think we're going to see an increase of the other combinations, and I would say it's the 4 plus 1 other, or just 2 locations.
Right.
In terms of the, it might be. I was going to repeat. As far as the broader distributed meetings, multiple points. I think as it continues to get more and more points, the number of instances is going to decrease. Just because it's going, currently that's harder to coordinate. And how often do you have people in 10 points who are coming together for a meeting? Not to say that it's not important that we don't want to have these multi-point AV, but I think the primary is let's get people where they are today, which is all in one room or with a couple people remote in one other location.
But make sure you do some studies on that, because we went down to HP, and it turns out that almost all their meetings are with remote.
Really? So they do a lot of conference calls with 10 different sites?
Yeah, or 2 or 3 sites. So it's make sure you don't anchor on what we do here at Microsoft. Make it unique.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, Liz has been coordinating a lot of customer visits to observe how real people and real companies have meetings, and not sort of
Boeing is
meeting anarchy we have here.
Boeing is a huge net meeting success story. There's 70,000 user hours per month right now, and climbing. So.
And Jonathan's going to kill me when I say this, but I'll say Microsoft is not typical and Boeing's not typical. But we love to look at Boeing because they've been so successful using NetMeeting. But Boeing isn't necessarily representative of the other major enterprises out there. HP isn't necessarily the only example, which is why we talk to customers all over the place and try and figure out, are all of your meetings distributed meetings? Does anyone ever get in the same room? And, do you have meeting rules posted up on the wall like they do in Boeing or like they do in Intel? So the most important thing is to stop looking around internally and seeing what people are doing at Microsoft. It's a great place maybe to test some tools after we develop them for people outside our company, because that's the big danger zone that we fall in.
We're definitely not typical knowledge workers. We share bits of our culture, and sometimes, as in the case of email, those things blossom in the knowledge worker workforce. But has anyone ever visited Ford Company in Detroit? I went there, and typical meeting was in a room with no windows. It looked like my elementary school classroom. It was like circa 1955. There was an overhead projector in the center of the table. There was someone coming in taking notes who didn't even know anything about the content of the meeting. This was like administrative. Yeah, it was like a court reporter kind of. And every meeting room had a copy of the meeting rules handbook. Which was a hardbound copy, and there's a set format that all of their meetings have to have, and they update that annually, and everyone has to know it, and so there is someone who has to be the leader of the meeting, and they have to follow a certain protocol, and that's the way meetings go.
So the invitation there is, if we see that at a bunch of different companies, and we see it at large enterprises like Ford, we see it at Intel, where people go through meeting training, is shouldn't that be how to run a meeting effectively by Microsoft? Right? Like all the tools are right there in place, and while you start in your meeting request and you go and you make sure that just like you fill out your attendees, you're also going to fill out your objective. And don't bother sending me a meeting request without an objective, because I'm going to learn to just send it back or just ignore it. So, that's, if there are meeting handbooks out there, we can learn from what's written thus far, but I think we can, be the evolution of the meeting handbook and say,
Or have the meeting handbook say, start Microsoft Office meetings. That's the first thing.
Right, but we have to be careful, though, to not end up with like a PowerPoint template for how to break bad news to people. It's like there's a standard Microsoft handbook that's implicit. We haven't even realized that. Putting it together has to be general and a platform for meetings.
Exactly. Yep.
So in terms of sociology as well, since we were griping at the beginning about people taking laptops into meeting, but just so that they could be surreptitiously doing email instead of tuning in. So if you have all of these documents shared and available during the meeting, then it seems to me you hit the same problem that I see when you have printed handouts, which is that people just tune out, just sort of read ahead, and they'll say, what about page 23 when you're 3 minutes into the meeting?
Sure.
So do you have any thoughts on how you manage the sociology of it when you're sharing everything there?
So the question is, how can you manage the sociology of somebody where today they might be looking at hard copy and be disconnected from what's going on in the meeting, and tomorrow they might be looking at soft copy that you've provided so conveniently for them and not be connected to what's going on in the meeting? I think that there are several things we can do. One of them can be within that document provide sort of the work alone and work together features of, I might skip ahead and read a couple pages, but there might be some button that says like snap to presenter, or that gets me right exactly back where we are, so I don't have to be the disruptive person that goes, what page are we on again? I could automatically get there. People will always sort of have their own thing going on in a meeting. I don't think we're going to be able to prevent that, but we can make it less disruptive, and we can make it easier for them to catch back up. And maybe they weren't paying attention to the whiteboard and can skim back over, look at something that shows like what happened in the whiteboard. How do we get to that formula on the whiteboard, and skip back and look at that over the course of time.
And kind of another stab at that is there are certain things that we do because we're human. And there are certain things that we do because it's our style. And I know plenty of managers who look ahead in a deck to find the conclusions, because maybe the person who put together the slide deck took too long in getting to the point. So do we necessarily want to come in and let that manager be less effective at getting to the point by being able to flip ahead? Maybe not, because maybe it's a manager's style to say, okay, I've just read your conclusions and that's what I want to talk about. So there are some things that maybe we're not really going to govern, and that's okay. But Jane kind of was talking about people do other things and get distracted in meetings, and when I was putting together this paper, I came across the term of multitasking in meetings, and especially for remote users, right? Like they're out there, whomever might be listening to this, who knows what they're doing, right? And so kind of that's the beauty of being remote, because you can multitask and no one sees you doing it and it's okay and you can kind of follow along. And so I was kind of putting it in there as, this could be an opportunity, but do we really want to be meddling around with things and encouraging people to multitask? Well, okay, if they're going to do it anyway, can we help them multitask and still keep on following what's going on in the meeting, to Jane's point of knowing which slide you're on? So, sometimes it's that fine line of, how much are we trying to really control people's focus or behaviors in a meeting.
Whose experience is it anyway?
Yeah.
Is it the people who are trying to talk to this person who's got the mute button pushed on their phone, who's remote? Or is it the person who is participating remotely and someone just walked into their office and they really have to have this conversation right now? Do we optimize for them so that they can catch up in a non-disruptive way? And I think the answer is, hopefully we'll provide features for both those people, and whoever organizes the meeting, or people will have a choice about whether they use them or not. Maybe you have a fully restrictive meeting where everybody must participate and I control everything. Any other questions?
I wonder if you guys have any data on the types of meetings, like what type of meetings occur more often, what kind of meetings?
Types of meetings in terms of brainstorming or things like that. Just make sure that we're saying the same thing in terms of types of meetings. Is it a status meeting? Is it a brainstorming meeting, decision meeting, that type of thing?
That type, or it's like how many meetings are remote? How many meetings?
Sure. I have a bunch of primary data which I've collected on that, which I'm more than happy to point you to. And just one thing to kind of call out on that, I've also kind of one of the things I've been repeating a bunch is that it's not always about trying to type meetings in terms of, this is a brainstorm meeting or this is a decision-making meeting. This is kind of where we were when we first started looking at meetings. People were saying, what are we going to do for the brainstorm meeting or whatever? What I was saying is let's identify actions that are common across all those types. because often what you'll find is that a decision-making meeting has elements of brainstorming and decision-making and status checking and all the same things. And so what we are more concerned with are what are the commonalities that we can address first, and then get into the things that get into more specific types of meetings and the decision-making tools and things like that. So, we did ask users, how would you characterize your meetings, decision-making, brainstorming, things like that, and they did answer, but you could also say that they had to answer it in order to get to the next question in the survey. So I don't know if it's particularly accurate stuff.
We've done exercises in trying to figure out, for different types of meetings, would we provide different tools, for example? Or are there features that are better suited to certain types of meetings? And one of the things we found was that pretty much everyone wanted all the tools in every type of meeting. So as far as feature differentiation, there wasn't a need for a lot of them. Maybe some tools figure more prominently. We would never say, well, this is a brainstorming meeting, therefore you don't get access to this tool. So it's more a matter of how to optimize and not how to only provide things for that type of meeting.
So thanks very, very much for coming out, and be in touch. Thanks, Dean.